think while we're giving folks 1 or 2 more minutes to come in, Justin, we will take this time to thank the Whaley School of Business, Dean Sean O'Rourke, the School of Education and Human Services, Dean Nancy Wallace, the CCATE Center, Director Heather Campbell, and various faculty and staff who have gone to support these wonderful conversations on AI series here at Canisius University, where we are considering in all sorts of eclectic ways how AI supports our teaching, learning, and professional work. I think that's getting picked up on microphone.
I hope so. This is a lovely microphone we have here. It is a big silver blue ball, and I think it's probably catching everything.
All right, Justin, I think we can probably begin. Why don't you begin by introducing yourself and your wonderful program here at Canisius University?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen first, make sure that people can see it. Great. Hi, I'm Justin Vecchio. I am Assistant Professor of Computer Science and Cybersecurity here at Canisius University. I've been with the university full-time for 2 years now, entering my 3rd year. Before that, I worked in industry for around 20 years, and for 17 of those years, I worked at a local company called Kubrick. They're located right across from the airport. If you ever see like the big tan brick building when you land, it says Calspan on it, but Kubrick's actually there. Small side note, the most advanced hypersonics shock tunnel in the world is located right in Buffalo, New York, behind that tan brick building. You can look on the Kubrick site and learn all about it. Pretty neat. We still do a lot of advanced stuff in Western New York. So, where is my presentation? There it is. Large language models. Welcome to the possibilities. I've given this presentation a bunch of times to a lot of different folks, ranging all the way from K-8 teachers to people at national laboratories, scientists who work in support of the DoD. And everybody is fascinated by this topic. And it only grows. What's that? Oh, share screen. My apologies. I did not share. I was sharing my screen. Okay, outstanding. So I have given this, it resonates with everybody, and it's a topic that everyone is embracing. I can't find much research right now that doesn't involve large language models because they're so gosh darn good at what they do. So I'll step you through what they are. I'm going to give you my experience with large language models, how I became involved with them, a little bit of the background on how it works. Some of it will be technical. Don't be afraid. I'll step you through. I don't understand all the ins and outs of how it comes up with the final answer, but I understand the theory behind it. The different large language model options that have available to you, and then using large language models for custom data sets. There's a new implementation of this. It's called a RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, where you enhance your chatbots by uploading your own sets of documents. And I'll show you exactly how to do that. I'll show you how to do it in a variety of different contexts. And there's going to be hands-on demonstrations. Pretty much everything that I do for you today, you're going to be able to do on your own. You're going to be able to do all that stuff on your own. It depends on how technically skilled you are. There's one technology I'm going to talk about that you could actually just download and install on your desktop. And in fact, I think just yesterday I was looking at ChatGPT, and who here has used ChatGPT or OpenAI? I'm assuming if folks use ChatGPT? A little bit. Okay. Have you used Bing Chat? You haven't used Bing Chat. Have you used any chat agents at all, like any generative agents at all? Okay, so you haven't used them. All right. Okay, very good. Oh, this is going to be fun. If you have questions online, my co-moderator, Mark, will handle those and let me know when they come up. And I'll explain to you how to create your own ChatGPT agent. Yeah, so everyone who begins to use them, you pretty much tend to fall in love with them. There's a segment of people who say, oh, it gave me the wrong answer to this question, so I'm not going to trust it anymore. That happens all the time with respect to large language models, but for the most part, they tend to give you the right answer and put you on the right track if you have questions that you want to solve. So if you're the type of person who gets back an incorrect answer to a question, don't lose faith in them and just believe that they're good for nothing. They're used a lot, and I can guarantee you that they're being integrated into every conceivable industry that you can possibly imagine. So this is a technology that's not an enabling technology. Something like cloud computing is an enabling technology. It just and gives you more capabilities and options to do the same thing at a better scale. This is a transformative technology where you can do things that you weren't able to do before. So that's why it's so neat. Large language models in the Department of Defense. If you're familiar with DARPA, so our Department of Defense and NSF, National Science Foundation, funds a lot of NSF does the basic research and DARPA leads into like the applied research. But if you're wondering how all these technologies come into vogue and how they get their initial funding, it's government entities like NSF and DARPA who really do set the stage for the initial research that leads to what you eventually see. So I worked on a project back in 2020, 2019 called Semaphore. It was offered by DARPA. The University of Buffalo has research on it. You can look there as well. I knew some of the researchers who were working on it. They still work on it. I think the program's still going. But the whole idea was, could you do fake media detection? And you'll see here, where this on the right-hand side, you'll see a picture of Bill Gates, and I think he's holding up some sign. It was a Facebook post. If you click here, I'll give you $5,000. And it was a completely fictitious, fabricated image generated by artificial intelligence. That's definitely looking like Bill Gates, but he never held such a sign. So this was the initial inkling of why you wanted to look into generative AI technologies. So actually, their first application, which is not entirely surprising, the first application of these types of models was for disinformation campaigns. Disinformation campaigns, which have like come into vogue in the US, or we've become aware of them since like say 2016 and the 2020 elections and all the time, are basically our adversaries to the United States, trying to generate information that's fake but seems real and can be derisive or reach some goal that they want. And this is nothing new. These first models were used for this. They were not as capable as today's models, but certain countries have paid interest to that. We are sort of on the lagging curve of the education for LLMs and disinformation. But surprise, surprise, countries that border on Russia are quite aware of how these large language models have been used for disinformation. And I give there's a link there, or actually there's an article there. You can just Google it, about how Finland has an active program to identify disinformation. And this disinformation is created by the large language models. So how do these models work? And what happened in January of 2022 that was so interesting? So I was on this Semaphore project here, and I would see the output of these large language models. You could ask it a question, say, I want you to tell me an entire story, make it 16 paragraphs long and have it be about unicorns and things like this. And it would give you a story that sort of followed along those lines, and you would read through it. I'll actually show you a demonstration in a little bit here. And you would look at it and say, oh, that sort of makes sense. This is onto something. Compared to like the generative AI that was creating images, it was not nearly as mature. And this was, say, like in 2021. By January of 2022, at that point in time, by January of 2023, it was able to generate spectacular results. So look at this slide right here. This is ChatGPT when it was released this one was actually from November of 2022, and it was released. And I went there the first day and I typed in this C program. I said, hey, write me a C program. Melanie, appreciate this. I wanted to define a circle, find the area of the circle, create a loop that iterates 100 times, and then it inscribes a shape inside of it over and over again and figures out how much the area of the shape inside of it like covers the area of the circle. So it's a fairly complex program. On the left-hand side is the C program that it output. So I gave it just this fairly straightforward. There were some things in there that if I would probably have to explain it to a human, and it gave me a C program that did exactly what I wanted. Just by instructing it to do that, which is like, wow, okay, that's really crazy that it can do it that well. If you saw what it was doing before November of 2022 compared to what was released in November of 2022, it was light years ahead of where it was. So it's not surprising. People are like, well, why didn't like companies like OpenAI or other companies why didn't they withhold this technology? It's because it was so darn good that the engineers and the other people working on it said, we want to show this off. And as any software engineer knows, you want to show off what you do. So also, it's an educator's nightmare because especially in computer science, well, it just changes what we have to do, especially in computer science, but also the other disciplines as well. But for computer science, there's a whole segment of questions that are sort of off limits to us now because students can simply go and ask these questions, or they're off limits to us in certain venues. Like, I'm going to make this a homework question for you because it's like, all right, I'm just going to go to ChatGPT or any other OpenAI model and get my answer. But the flip side of it is it's really, really great at helping me create lesson plans. Really, it is. So I know my domains pretty well with respect to software engineering and computer science. And I will come up with a lesson plan. And in my ChatGPT, I will have different courses listed out there. And then I'll have my discussions with ChatGPT about like, hey, I want to do this lesson for my 213 class, and I want to hit these points. Do you think these are good points to hit? And probably 95% of the time, it will agree with me and say, yeah, you're getting it right. Or I want to come up with this example. I love like analogies and examples. I'm like, I want to try this example. Is this like an accurate description of how this works that would resonate with the students? And it's like, yes, it will. And then there's like 5% of the time where I think something works a particular way, and I'll have a discussion with ChatGPT or these large language models, because it's actually an agent that you can converse with. And it will say, no, you don't have that part right. And I'll be like, I really thought that I had that part right. And I'm always surprised when I find something that I had the wrong mental model about. And it's like, you're right, but you got this critical part wrong. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm glad. And then it helps me improve my lesson plan. It's great. I mean, it's great at developing rubrics. It's great at developing like scoring approaches toward assignments. I mean, it really is very helpful. It's great at me developing like large projects for students where I'm like, I want to add this in and I want to add this to this computer project, to this programming project. What do you think? And then I just like bounce ideas off of it. And then it helps me out along the way. So there's good and there's bad and there's good to it. So a little bit a history of the neural nets and their fundamentals. So I want to express none of this is new. None of this stuff is new. Absolutely none of it is new. What's new is the computing technologies that are available to us and the advent of GPUs that allow us to do like the matrix math a lot faster than we could do before. And really, it comes down to companies like NVIDIA and the gaming industry developing these chips to run graphics, and then they're repurposing it for other artificial intelligence applications. How unnew is this? Essentially, the idea for a neural network, which is what backs all of these generative AI models, was first published in 1943. So you can go back. This diagram right here, if I showed you the most advanced like layers of like a neural network, in 1943, they had like worked out the math of how this all worked. And they're like, okay, this will essentially work. But they didn't have like the computing technologies or capabilities to make much use of it. Fast forward to 1958, the actual first neural network that was built, the actual physical first one that was constructed, was right at the Cornell Aeronautical Laboratories. That, again, is the building across the street from the Buffalo Airport. It used to be Cal, so Cornell owned that building. And they had something called Cornell Aeronautical Laboratories. So I worked in that building for like 17 years. I wasn't there when it was Cornell Aeronautical Laboratories, but I talked to people who had worked in that building for 40 years, and they said at one point in time, we had 2,500 people with PhDs in math and physics and engineering walking around this building. And I'm like, what? I'll tell you the story of how it failed very quickly. After the Vietnam War, the alumni of Cornell basically said, you have to divest from this company, from this entity. So they divested and it became a private company. But in 1958, see that like jumble of wires right there? They created the first neural networks. They were physical neural networks. And what they were able to do, I actually watched like old videos about it, but they were able to like detect like male and female when you put like blast slides into this computer essentially and pushed it down, it could determine if somebody was a male or a female. But it was like limited in what it could do. And just so you know, everything that I'm talking about with respect to the generative AI, there's been a debate in the artificial intelligence community that's gone on since the inception of artificial intelligence. And this debate is it possible, is everything that we are developing right now with large language models, for example, is that what is termed to be weak AI that's great at performing a specific task or solving a specific problem? Or is it general AI that refers to AI systems that possess human level intelligence and cognitive capabilities? So this is the interesting part, is that people conflate that what they're seeing is strong AI, but still everything that you see with large language models is in fact weak AI. It's just good at one particular task. And I'll explain to you like the tasks that it's good at and why it's good at those tasks. In fact, this is me having a conversation with ChatGPT. And I said, hey, ChatGPT, which one are you? Are you strong AI or weak AI? And it said, oh, I'm weak AI. I am not a version of strong AI. I can't solve any problem out there. I'm really good at engaging in dialogue and sounding like a human and using like a vast set of probabilities to come up with language that matches your questions, which you would anticipate to be my reply, but I'm not a general AI. Just as a side note on that, Elon Musk is trying to create general AI. He's gone out and hired all of like the AI, all of the AI folks out there who are in the know and paid them a huge salary and said, go and create me general AI, or strong AI, I should say. And if you read the book, if you read magazines by like computational linguistics, they really bristle at this stuff. And they're like, this is not how the mind works. What you're doing is neat. It's great for an application, almost to the point where it's not the path where you're going to lead to like a strong AI system. That's just another thing if you're interested in that. I'm not going to spend time on how large language models work, but I will tell you, I'll give you some examples of how they work. So it's all based on probabilities. That's really what it comes down to, is probabilities. So when you hear that they're training a model on a corpus, it's going through that entire corpus and it's learning all the probability of the co-occurrences of words, or where words typically occur in relation to each other. And I would say probably about 6 years ago, this AI approach called long short-term memory, filling in the blank, was like all in the vogue of artificial intelligence. It was the state of the art for artificial intelligence. And I show it in the slide on the bottom there, this thing about next token prediction. And this model is given a sequence of words, and it produces like what's the next most likely tokens. Like Hannah is a sister, Hannah is a friend. And this one, Jacob blank reading. Well, typically Jacob fears, loves, enjoys, hates reading. And that was like the state of the art for generative AI. Or one of the things it was really good at doing was filling in that type of information. Then I think it was 2017. This fellow from Google, there's others too. He has other authors as well, but he authored this paper called "Attention is All You Need." I've skimmed it. I've never read it from end to end. But essentially what it did was not pay attention to the sequence of the word and guess the next word in the sequence, but consider words in the context and all the words around them and how they co-occur with each other. So consider these sentences. I use the word plant because there's different senses of the word plant. In the first one, the farmer will plant in the spring. And you might naturally imagine that the words that co-occur with it are farmer, spring, seeds, warm weather, stuff like that. Let me plant an idea in your head. The words that tend to co-occur with plant in that sense are ideas, head, thoughts. The plant needs more sunlight to grow. Sort of similar to the first one, planting a seed, but a little bit different. Sunlight, grow, nurture. And she works at a manufacturing plant. Yeah, manufacturing. So the idea here is that words have multiple meanings, and you want to create almost like an index of all the words in a corpus and say, well, plant has got all these different contexts that are available to it. I'm not going to go over the details of this, But just know that this paper in 2017, Attention is All You Need, was one of the seminal papers in artificial intelligence and led to a lot of what you see with these large language models. And here's what, very simple, it's a 2D version of it, but it gives you an idea of how when a computer system trains on a set of documents, one of the things that is created is, I'll call it like an index. It's only got 2 dimensions, but it got a lot more dimensions when you have hundreds of thousands of documents and words that you're working with. But you can see that the words are sort of like are near each other, like plant, enlighten, impart. That's like to plant an idea. Plant, tree, weed, vegetable. That's like you're gonna like plant something in the ground. Oh, and that one is actually like the type of plant, the noun plant. Plant, seed, sow, harvest. Those ones sort of go together. Plant, facility, building. Those ones go together. So what it's really doing is it's like teasing out and saying, this is basically how these words co-occur together when they're in text. And that's really what it's doing, is it's going through that all those corpus of documents that it's been trained on, and it's identifying and saying, these are where these words tend to co-occur. So you can imagine if you had like legal documents or chemistry-related documents or things like that. Stop. None of this is a new idea. Again, even this is not a new idea. Trying to like group words together based on the context of where they occur. I worked on a system at the University of Buffalo. It was with Bill Rappaport and Stuart Shapiro. It was called SNEPS. And they created these essentially neural networks, except they did it all by hand. And you would create like vast networks of co-occurring words, basically to understand like word plant, if it's used as a verb, what context is it's used in. And this is something that I did all by hand. The trick here is that now it's just been all automated and that like the computer algorithms can do it for you. It was a bear to maintain these things. They work, but they were not nearly, they were brittle and they weren't as extensible as the new systems. So let me tell you how an LLM is trained. So an LLM, the large language model, is what is used by Bing Chat. I don't know what Bing Chat calls there. So OpenAI is the OpenAI LLM. Google, you may have seen like the advertisements for Gemini. That's the new one, is Google Gemini is the one that they train. But there's tons of open source ones too. So for example, a group of engineers from Google left Google recently, maybe about a year ago, and they created a new one called Mistral. And I'll show you how you can actually download and use all these. So there's a plethora of large language models out there that are available, that are freely available as well, that you can just download and use. I'll explain to you how to actually use these. But one of the neat things, one of the first things that you have to do in the whole LLM training process before we actually see the LLMs in action is you have to do this data pre-processing where you tokenize everything, break it all into words, and then talk about these word embeddings. So a word embedding is basically, what are the words close to my target word of interest that typically occur? So let's look at these examples at the bottom. If I weren't recording this, I'd walk over and I'd point to them. The first two talk about fall and autumn. So fall is sort of interchangeable with autumn. And all the words that tend to co-occur around fall and autumn, leaves, Halloween, pumpkin, school buses, pencils, they'll like go with fall and autumn. But fall into place is an entirely different context for that word fall. Fall into place could mean fall down. So down would be one of them. Ground, fell to the ground, fall into place, come to order, things like that. So it's a different sense, a different context for fall. So let me show you my first little demo here. I am doing this on something called Google Colabs. And this is some Python code. I bring this up because you can do this for free. If anyone wants to learn Python and wants to do anything like this, there's something called Google Colabs that you could freely use. Any of the examples that I have here, I'm willing to provide with you, the ones that I did on Google Colabs. What's that? Google Colabs. So it's Google, and then just search on Colabs. And what it does, Mel, is it gives you an entire UI where you can basically run Python scripts and do what I'm doing right here. So I'm going to run this. I'll let this run in the background here. And here's what happens. On the left-hand side, I'm going to move this a little bit out of the way. On the left-hand side, I went and I said, okay, here is my sentence. Fall is a season and autumn is a season. I submit both of those sentences to what is called Word2Vec. And I basically say, for these two sentences, give me the 100 words. That matrix right there would be 100 if you counted them all out. Give me the 100 words that are most often spoken in text when it's fall is a season or autumn is a season. And then I compare those two matrices. There's absolutely no difference between them. The exact same 100 tokens tend to be used in text in the context of fall is a season or autumn is a season. Does that make sense to folks? Like it's the exact same set of words. This is like how the LLM is actually going to work. It's the exact same set of words. Now, if I take either fall is a season or autumn is a season, and I compare it with the matrix of 100 words most commonly used in the context of fall into place, guess how much of an overlap there is between them? 0. There's like absolutely no overlap between them. So whatever those words are, I could actually find the words. I output the weights. I didn't like figure out what the words were. But the idea here is basically you're figuring out, hey, what are the most commonly co-occurring words that happen to be with this? And the crazy part is that if it's like a corpus of emails that if you trained it and you had like a corpus of emails about like a particular topic for a company, and you submitted sentences about what they're talking about in the emails, you would get like words that happen within the emails that company talks about that topic. That sort of makes sense. Okay, so this right here, oh, my wee little demo didn't work there, but that's okay. I got a better one coming up here. So the architecture of an LLM. We don't have to worry about that one so much. Okay, pre-trained transformers. So what the pre-trained transformer does is the following. Here's what the pre-trained transformer does. The Word2Vec, word embeddings, tells you the co-occurrence of where all the words are to each other. That pre-trained transformer basically tells you the structure that those words typically occur in. And by that, I mean like paragraphs, sentences. So it's like this is where all the training process, you can imagine the word embedding thing is like pretty easy to calculate, but this part is really hard. You have to train on hundreds of thousands of documents so that it can actually learn a statistical model that basically says, here's the probability of where all these words are going to fall if I was going to answer this question, and then let me output a paragraph and see what it looks like and see if it meets the measure of what your question was. And it's really wild that it actually works. But basically, you've trained it on millions of documents. You learn the structure of English grammar for the domain that you're interested in, or how English is used in that particular domain. And then based on that bag of words that you stuff into it, it basically comes back out and says, oh, okay, I would structure it this way and answer the question like this. Or I would give you a reply like this, which is a simplified version of how it works, but it's basically what it's doing. Now, this part where you have these pre-trained transformers, these take tons of time to train. I mean, they take a long time to train. You are talking like 8 days, 12 days to generate one of these models to answer a question. The amount of money that it takes in terms of electrical horsepower to actually generate that model at the end of it is tens of millions of dollars. So there is like an investment from these companies like OpenAI and Bing Chat when they do this, because they're actually sucking down a lot of electricity to go and train these models. And it's to a point where some people have done some back of the napkin calculations and said, well, there's an upper limit to how many models we can train because we're going to run out of electricity if everybody tries to train it this way. So it costs a lot of money. So if you are like an independent researcher and you're like, I'm going to train my own model, it costs a lot of money. So you need like a lot of resources, and there's few people who could just train it on their own. You would have to be like a large company, but that doesn't mean you can't do like a lot of cool things with it. With the models themselves. Can you train your own data set? Yeah, I give an example. I have like I trained a model, like a very, very simple one. Okay. But now I want to talk about something else here. This is the last piece of the puzzle. It all comes down to what the model was trained on with respect to an answer. So let me get my next, let me cross my fingers here and hope that my next demo is going to work here. Oh, okay. So who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance? And this stems to another topic that you hear people talking about all the time with respect to large language models. Has anybody heard about the bias factor? Like, okay, bias, there's bias in these models. So consider this question. If you went to a large language model and said, who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance? The training corpus dictates the answer. So which one do you think it is? Is the LLM a probability machine, heavily weighted toward the US version of the Pledge of Allegiance? So out of the box, it's going to reply from the LLM that, about a Pledge of Allegiance in terms of the US one. Or is the large language model going to be smart? And it's going to very quickly realize, well, I don't know. There's a Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't know this until I researched it. There's a Pledge of Allegiance in the Philippines. India has a pretty serious one. Singapore, Nigeria, these all have a Pledge of Allegiance. So you have to be more clear about what you want. The answer is it just plows ahead with the US one, because that's the most number of documents it was trained on. So when you hear about bias in a large language model, this is like a simple example of a bias, is the fact that it just assumes, oh, you want the one for the US. But the reality is there's other ones that are out there. Yeah.
So it's a reflection of the amount of documents that form the basis of developing the model.
Yes. Yep. Now, it makes sense. Yeah, exactly. No. And if you don't give it enough context, then it will just choose the most prevalent answer. So it's biased toward what's the most prevalent answer in its corpus of documents. And this the input of documents that it was trained on. And it's like, okay, so this is the one I most know about. So this is probably the one you're talking about. Now, if you preface it and basically say, I want you to be open-minded about that, literally, if you preface the LLM and say, I want you to be open-minded and tell me about all the Pledge of Allegiances out there, it would go and answer with all the Pledge of Allegiances that are out there. And I've been surprised that academia talks a lot about biases. We're introducing biases and this and this. And the people that I show it to who have nothing to do with academia quickly understand that it's biased, but easily overcome it and say, oh, it's probably because this, and this is the way the world works. It probably got a lot of these things. Ask the question this way. And it's like really surprising. I'm like, okay, you were confronted with bias, but rather than get like angry about it, you basically said, oh yeah, this is how it works. Go and change it this way and it'll give me the answer that I want. But there are examples where there's all kinds of examples, especially with respect to image recognition, where it does things with respect to bias, because the whole corpus of what it's been trained on is dominated by one ethnicity or one gender, and that leads to like a whole set of problems. I want to show one thing though. So earlier I mentioned that like something magical happened in November of 2022 with the release of OpenAI. If you read this text right here, it might be a little bit small, but if you read that text right there, this is how OpenAI, their best public-facing model, would answer the question, who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance in October of 2022? It's a big jumbled mess, right? So somehow the engineers at OpenAI trained the model enough, and then all of a sudden, like, poof, it just started answering things the right way. Probably because I don't know what other tweaks they did along the way, but you can see here, it's like headed down the right path. And all of a sudden, it just does a kick butt job in November of 2022. And they go and release it onto the world. And they're like, you are just going to take this. And we're not going to tell anyone else that we're going to release it, but we're just going to go and do it. Oh, if you want to know what the LLM is doing, the questions that you ask it early on, you could talk to LLMs, and I think that this is actually a question. I think this is actually a question. I was teaching a database course last fall, and I forget which AI engine this was, but instead of giving me a well-formed answer, it gave me its train of thought, how it decomposes a question. So you can actually see here how the engineers, I think this one was Anthropic. I think this one was Anthropic, but you can actually see, I'm asking it a question about Sparkle, and then, is Sparkle with a triple store? I bet it was OpenAI. And it's like, and then you can actually see that the engineers there are like, okay, I need to ask this type of question, and I need to create a knowledge graph, and this is for question so-and-so, and it like decomposes it into like a bunch of separate mini questions to like recompose it back into an answer to your big question. But I thought that was interesting that early on with some of these AI models, someone would like make hiccups and they would give you answers that were like, wait a minute, what's this? I'm like, oh, this is actually its train of thought internally to go and answer my question. And I can basically, I've done like knowledge representation stuff, so I can sort of follow along with what this is doing. Okay. Enough slides. Slides are great. I hope I gave you a decent overview of how LLMs work. But now let's talk about how these things are being used in everyday life. So from August of 2023 to August of 2024, there are an explosion of choices for you to use with respect to large language models. It started out that ChatGPT was the way to go. I don't even have Anthropic up there, but I think Anthropic was like the next big one. And then Bing Chat got released. Now there's Gemini from Google. Oh, Anthropic is up there. So there are commercial ones that are out there and that are available. So I'll show you some in a second here. Has anybody seen the middle one yet? Where you go to a site and you have a chat or a chat agent when you search it, which will actually like answer your questions. I'll show you that too. So now people are starting to do that. Yeah, well, they'll actually have like a chat agent. And then the last one on the bottom is something called Olama. It's my new personal favorite one. You can install it on your laptop, and you can have a completely disconnected large language model that's not on the internet. It's just running on your laptop, and you can ask it questions and get it to answer questions. Oh, I'll show you that in a second. It's super fun. Yeah, get ready. Yeah. Yeah, I'll do. They're big. The models are big. They're like, it's like 7.4 gigabytes in size is how big it is. But there's enough in there for it to like answer your questions. And you can get bigger ones. You can, if you wanted to, you could download models, and it loads it all into your RAM. So it eats up a lot of RAM. And I found ones that were like 32. I think I have 32 gigabytes of RAM on my machine. And I loaded one that was 32 gigabytes of RAM, and my machine like shut down because it just like loaded it all into RAM. And then I ran out of RAM.
Diagnostic software, or it tells to see it as you see who's being burned out.
I did watch it. Yeah, I watched it because I wanted to see what would happen. But it'll load it all into RAM, and it'll answer your questions.
So what's the advantage of that?
Oh, I'll show you. Yeah, I'll show you what the advantage is. Yeah. Oh, this is something called Olama. Yeah. I'll show you this in a second. Yeah. So let me show you some of the commercial ones. So ChatGPT. ChatGPT is really good at answering. It's a great chat engine chatbot. I have the commercial version. I think I pay $30 a month. I finally had to like break down and buy it. So you can ask it any question that you want, and it will go and like give you answers to it and do all like the nifty stuff. Like I want a recipe for this. This is what's in my fridge. A new thing that it's done is the following. So one of the capabilities that it gives you is it allows you to upload documents or sets of documents, and you can answer questions about those documents. So I'm going to upload into it. And the other thing is, if you believe their agreements and their terms, I've got my friendly assistant here. And I've told my friendly assistant to be private and only available to me. Because if you use the free versions of these tools, they can reuse, they'll train on your questions and your train of thought. Or there are some of the free versions that allow you to upload documents, or God forbid, copy and paste documents into it. And it will just use that and suck it into its training data and basically say, well, I'm going to use this too, because I know that this type of question is related to this document. So I'm just going to go and use it. If you read the terms and agreements, which is why you shouldn't like just copy and paste like a student's paper into it or something like that, because it's like, but according to their terms and agreements, I created my little friendly assistant here and I told it to be private. So it shouldn't train on this. It shouldn't open this up to the public. So here's the deal. On my computer here, I've got this set of PDF files. Each one of these PDF files, I'll do these ones right here. I'll do these right here, are Uber receipts from a conference I went to last week. I had to like get the Uber receipts and they wanted them because they would kindly reimburse me. So I'm going to upload these PDFs to ChatGPT. Here I go uploading it. Now, tell me about the documents I am about to upload. What are they? Yep, trip to Baltimore, Maryland. Absolutely, during August. Yeah, that's exactly where I went. I went to BWI and then I went to that street. Yep, it was 10.5 more. Yep. Traveled your hotel. So it's getting it all right. It basically is able to figure out like everywhere that I went on my trip and summarize it for me. Yeah, exactly. What's that?
You know, finance people and AR and.
I think that the world of IRS forensic audits and stuff like that are changed forever, because now instead of saying, give me all your emails, and then I'll have an agent going through and reading each one, jam them into here. This does it. And then it can do super cool things like, then it can do super cool stuff like this. What is by 500? Was it East Baltimore Street? I don't know if I liked Baltimore. I liked Baltimore. It was fun. West. It's great architecture. It's just a little scary at times. I think this is it. Yeah. What is West 500 West Baltimore? Well, yeah, that's where I was. I was at the university. And I was at their School of Law because that's what the conference was. It had nothing to do with law, but you know. And now this is not in my Uber receipts. This is coming from the training documents that it has access to, and it's like, oh, this is what's by there. I don't know if I don't think I can do it with ChatGPT, but I'll tell you what, they're all different. These commercial ones are all different, and I wouldn't be surprised if stuff with like Google AI, like the Gem, because now that I was trying to outdo each other, I wouldn't be surprised if like the Gemini one wouldn't like take you down that path and say, yeah, I can do something like that for you.
So Ernst Young, this is about a decade ago.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have used this. There's a study to identify, because they do so many fraud audits. Did a study to identify in emails the most common words that people used when they were fraudulently using funds. So hypothetically, you could take those emails, dump it into here, and could identify.
I think it was OpenAI that used the Enron cache.
Yep.
Emails for the Enron discovery.
Yeah.
the training. So ChatGPT may be uniquely capable of looking for corporate fraud,
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
which should give pause to anyone planning corporate fraud.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is all different. So another thing is coded language. I mean, people use coded language all the people doing nefarious things use coded language a lot, and they will have like complete conversations. And this would be great. I like picking up stuff and being able to say like they're using this phrase a lot, and it probably means something in this type of context. So it's going to be really helpful.
Stress, but the signs
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
it could be assisting
Mhm.
diagnoses or providing help.
Yeah. It's a big, I mean, I'll tell you one story at the very end. Yeah, so it does stuff like this. ChatGPT, you can go, you can do this stuff. You can upload your own custom data sets. If you join the community, oh, where are you? A friendly assistant. I'm trying to find where they have like where is it? No, it doesn't. You can have it add a team workspace where you can have like multiple people joining together. But there was another explore the GPTs. This is it. This is what I want to talk about. So now people are getting really excited about this stuff. And you find communities if you joined into this writing. And what these are custom chat agents where people have added tons of content about a particular topic, so that you get these agents that are really good at answering questions. So like, I know that I found one in here that was like about Excel, because everybody likes to do Excels and macros and formulas in there. And then there was one about the world's most powerful, it's only got a 3.9 rating, Excel discussions. So what is this one? Start a chat. So what is this? Marketing, branding, and ads. I got to be honest, I've never used this, but this would, I don't know. I haven't explored this. I only know that it's, what's that?
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know, because I haven't really used them that much, because I'm just not doing this. But I know that I've talked to people. So this is like extremely useful. And the generative AI stuff. So we're talking about like I can't imagine a marketing campaign in 2024 that doesn't start with the marketing people having a long conversation with a chat agent about like, what do you think? What do you think would work? What do you think wouldn't work? I know this because I've talked to the marketing people and they tell me this is what we do now. That's like an industry that changed overnight. Computer programming, more and more headed this way. More and more headed this way. I would say that every large company I know, and by large I mean like probably has like over 200 employees, has software products, are developing their own large language models internally that they give to their developers that are trained on the source code for the applications they develop. And basically, they now write natural language descriptions like, I want a function that does this. And then it comes back. And I want a function that does this, and these test cases to make sure, and here's the test cases to make sure it works. And then I'll come back and like, they'll spit back the code. And then they copy and paste it. They run it and they're like, oh, it worked. And then they just accept it. I can guarantee you that like your financial institutions, like the code that's running it, like is just a certain percentage of it, everly getting more and more is automatically generated. There's no doubt, because it's such a productivity gain.
I had students who have to submit a plan after 3 semesters with me.
Yeah.
I only look at one column, the results column in their plans. So if I were to do the paid version of this, upload those plans and then ask specific questions about the outcomes, because that's really all I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Would be able to draw conclusions.
It would be able to draw conclusions. Now, I want to preface that, but I want to say, yeah.
Basically repeat her question so that folks remotely get a sense of what the context is.
So the question is that you have your students develop a plan, and you're interested in one column of the plan when it's submitted, but you want to ask more questions of the plan, maybe at a later time, or maybe when they submit it. And your idea is you could upload it to this and like ask that question of it.
20
You may upload 20 of it and start, yeah.
How successful
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
were the students, how successful were the outcomes?
Yeah.
look at the outcomes and say, well, we're going to give you a percentage. It would just draw a conclusion.
It would draw a conclusion. Now it would be up to you to validate that that's a correct conclusion, because it's going to draw some conclusion, but you have to, it's a starting, the way I look at it is two things. One is you have to make sure that what you're uploading has like privacy settings and that you're not sharing it with other people and that it's not going someplace that you don't want it to. And second, that any answer you are given, you should have like 5 follow-up questions that you yourself want to like poke around and figure out. When I develop my lesson plans and I'm like, am I getting this right? Is this the way to do it? And they'll give me an answer. I will always like validate other ways or ask it more questions until I'm convinced that, yep, this is right. This is something that I should present to the students. It would be a good thing.
That this can be done.
Yeah.
It's going to influence how I'm creating my plan, what I might be looking for from the students. So let's say, did I meet my outcome? Yes,
Yeah.
no, any other issues like.
And think about this. It's been trained. I mean, I look at these courses, it's been trained on something called Common Crawl, which basically crawls the entire internet every month and finds every single page that's accessible and puts it on Amazon AWS. So if I'm designing a software engineering course and I ask it a question about the syllabus and the curriculum I'm planning, to some degree, I can have confidence that it's basically looked at all the software engineering courses out there and it's giving me an answer based on that and saying, this is like a good way to do it, or this is like, it's like, okay, so that's like the power of me not having to go through all of that, having an idea of what I want and having it fill in some of the details or have me think about it in a way that I haven't thought about it before. Super fun. Now, the other thing is, so goodness gracious, oh man, I'll do this. So I believe that pretty soon, just take me there. I'm looking for the thing. Okay, I want to go to LangChain. And I want to get something that basically is going to be like my little chat guy. Where's my chat? Do you see it here, Mark? Where's my chat? This is it right here. So now this is a site. So this has nothing to do with, you probably would not be interested with this at all, but I'm a software engineer. I want to know about APIs. I got 2 choices. I can either read the API, and for me to read Python API is not the most fun thing in the world because I find the API is very confusing. Or now I can go to this page. I use LangChain, and I can basically say, I want to ask you, I want to talk to an agent about this API. And it gives me all these different APIs that I can choose from. I can choose from Llama 3, GPT 4.0, Google Gemini Pro. Okay, you know what? I'll choose Google Gemini Pro, and I'll say like, how do I create a Chroma DB? I bring this up because you're going to see this more and more, where sites are basically just going to have interactive chat agents that they might not be, maybe they'll be trained on the document sets, but they'll basically take the document set and just add it to an existing model, and it'll all sort of work and be able to answer your questions. So you can imagine like Canisius admissions having something like this. For students who have questions about admissions, could have an agent that will go and answer you and give you the answers to these questions. But I think somebody told me, I had somebody give a presentation to my software engineers where they had one of these agents and a company was legally bound based on the reply that the agent gave. I forget the scenario, but you can get burned by stuff like that where it gives bad information. And then the people's like, well, you offered up this chat agent and this is what it told me. So this is what I believed your company was going to do. And it's like, oh no, this one, it wasn't able to answer the question. I didn't ask it like closely, pure enough. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, there's only 2 other things that I want to talk about here. As I mentioned, this thing called Ollama. So Ollama, so I started using this. I started using like the ChatGPT models, and I want to access it for my code. I actually want to incorporate it and integrate it into the code that I actually write. And for me to do that, they have what are called APIs that basically let me call ChatGPT from like my Java or Python code, but they charge me money. I was like, that's not cool. I don't want to have to pay, even though it's a fraction of a cent, I don't want to have to pay a fraction of a cent each time I want this large language model to give me an answer. Well, other people out there thought that was a terrible idea too, and they created this tool called Olama. And if you really want to, if you got a Mac, you can download it. There's a Windows preview. If you hit the Linux type, there's a Linux one. There's also a Docker one that's available. And what it does is it will, on your laptop, it will load any one of these models on your laptop. So Mel, this one is 4.7 gigabytes. I can run this one. This one's 40 gigabytes. I'm not going to be able to run this one. But what if I really wanted that great, perfect answer? I don't know how you'd even run this one because you would need something with 231 gigabytes of RAM. I don't even know how you'd do it. Yeah. Yeah, you'd have to chain them together. But these are all different models. Now look at this. Now, if I come over here, it runs at the command line. And this is the best part, is that we're going back in time. No fancy interface, although there are fancy interfaces. The person who developed this, what's that? Well, I like it. I like going back in time. I wish that I still had, you know how many cybersecurity problems would be solved if you still had just a command line behind email? Yeah, because clicking the links wouldn't matter at all if that's what you used. But there you go. But okay, so these are models that I've downloaded locally to my machine, and I'm about to load one. Olama run. This is all running locally. I'm not on the internet doing this. And I'm going to use something called Mistral, which is a model developed by a group of former Google engineers. It's loading up. I don't have feelings, no emotions. Okay. Tell me all the distances of the planets from the sun. Well, just like go and answer them all. So it's a large language model that you basically you have to be on the internet. This is wild because now all of a sudden I view it as like AI democratization because you are beholden to nobody outside the people who developed the model. You can run all this stuff locally. Again, everything's a double-edged sword. So now it's available to people just to run. They don't have to go off to the internet and have somebody else. The flip side of it is a lot of our security measures in this country come down to identifying people on the internet who are doing stuff. And you can imagine that you can now start to do things that are completely offline, that are pretty advanced. So everything, but for the most part, this is fantastic. And I embedded this actually in applications. So do people have questions about, you can just like download this and run this like locally on your laptop. If you have the Mac and the Windows, it looks like the Windows one is still experimental. And the person who started this he's just like a grad student out of the University of Toronto. So I got to talk him up and I'm like, oh, that's awesome that you did this. He's like a really friendly guy. He's like, oh yeah, it just developed this. I'm like, that is so cool. Yeah, yes. Yeah. Yes, Llama is Meta. Mm-hmm.
This question between training for 2000.
No, it won't. This is just a static model that you have.
I guess that's the advantage, right?
Yeah.
That
Mm-hmm.
You're not helping train Google's model.
Yeah, you're not helping train Google's model. You're not releasing your questions or your train of thought because now people are having like really in-depth conversations with this, and they're headed down paths where they might have stuff that they consider to be their intellectual property, and they don't want to like have it because it's not just a bunch of keyword searches in Google. Now it's like your complete train of thought, like really detailed questions. So that's just something else to consider. So this leads to a problem where companies are like basically saying, I'm shutting the door to this. I'm not allowing this in my company. I'm not going to allow anybody to search on this. And then in the medical profession, you can imagine the issues that they have because they're like, do we allow the nurse or the doctor to go in and ask the question of ChatGPT? Is it a good idea or is it a bad idea to do it? So this is me. So this was posed to me by somebody in the medical profession, like, that's like the dilemma. So I'm like, oh, so I had a chronic ear problem that I had from like the age of 3 all the way up until I was 30. And I had to have like a massive surgery on my ear. And and nobody could diagnose what it was until I found an ENT. I went to 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th ENT was the one who looked at it for like the sum and total of 2 minutes, told me exactly what it was, and says, you need a surgery as soon as possible. 4 ones before that didn't. I took all the symptoms that I had for all the years, and I was like, okay. I typed it in there, and I'm like, what do you think I have? Guess what its number one answer was? My exact ailment. I'm like, oh, okay, boy, I sort of wish that. Okay, so I went through. So I understand that people are worried about like in the medical field, but at the same point, that was for me was really eye opening, because I'm like, oh, I really wish somebody had something like this was available, because you could have saved me a lot of pain.
Because it's not that they would have immediately sharpened their scalpel and decided to attack it with surgery.
No.
It's that they would say, now we know the questions.
Now we know.
Are further.
Yes, exactly. We've narrowed it down. It gave me 3 things that it could be. I think it gave me like 3 things, but the first one was the one that said it's probably this, and here's the reasons why. And I was like, yeah, you could advocate for yourself. No, you could be more informed. Exactly. Because it was crazy. I was like, oh wow, this thing actually got it the first time. ChatGPT. Yeah, this one I just did on ChatGPT. I mean, maybe I did it on this one. I think it was ChatGPT. What's that? Oh, so you've got Copilot, yeah. Yeah. The other ones are oh goodness gracious, what's the other one that it's called? They tend to call them all co-pilots if they like help out. Like there's one called GitHub Copilot, which is your copilot for writing software code. And you can actually integrate it into, and then the Office. Now you see the ones where you have like Microsoft Office basically saying the person's like, oh my God, I need to take this 150-page document and summarize it in 5 slides. To the rescue, here it comes. But it actually does a good job.
You could get Copilot to fight itself.
Yeah. They basically have a search, it's essentially a
yeah.
The free version that's attached to search.
Yeah.
For sort of close cousin search.
Yeah. But this is it. This is like the big one. The big one right here.
So what do you think they're doing, the various companies, to address the issue of hallucination?
Oh.
I mean, they've got to be attacking the problem. To my mind, that's the most interesting problem of all.
Yeah.
Because it's the one reverse salient that I think really kind of threatens the success of AI.
Yeah,
in some areas, other areas, it's not relevant or it's not an issue.
Yeah.
Depending on what's being asked. But
so the hallucinations, the question asks is what about hallucinations? So hallucinations are when it just gives you completely fabricated information.
When somebody doesn't know, it just makes something up.
Yeah, it just makes something up and says, I don't know. I'm just because it's just co-occurrence of words. These, I don't know, I'll give the simple example. These are the 100 most prevalent words that co-occur with this. Let me jam out an answer without doing any type of self-reflection on it. Yeah, and then the other thing is oh, they have a taxonomy in here. The other one is like being able to not ask sensitive questions, not so much getting the wrong team or the wrong answer, but being able to ask like sensitive questions. Like, oh, do you know? I don't know. Do you know how to basically hotwire a Tesla so that I can gain access via its remote entry and stuff like that? And then there's like, and this company right here, Virtue AI, they had a nice taxonomy in here. I wanted to find that taxonomy. Oh, maybe they have it in here. You'll hear people talk about this term guardrails. and
Jailbreak.
jailbreaking. Yeah. Wonder if it's in here. Yeah, so there are companies like this that will actually go through and identify the types of risks in the model. Like there's system, and I think if you look at this, you'll see like there's confident advice in regulation industries. Like this model releases maybe too much information when you ask questions about regulations.
So this is a concern within the industry.
Mhm.
That people, the canonical simple example is how do I build a nuclear bomb? Do the math for me.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so obviously these companies are trying to keep their AI models from supplying that information.
Yeah.
As well as perhaps saying things that are racist, homophobic, in some way or another, really destructive.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this is a constant day-to-day job of folks within these organizations to try to keep these AIs
Keep them on the rails so they don't like go off and let you ask crazy questions. Yeah, they don't go rogue. Yeah, that was it. That was pretty much the end of it. I've done some other things with it as well. One thing that I did was so I myself, just here at Canisius, I had one of the research students help me with this. Is we went out and we found this PDF timeline about the Russian and Ukraine conflict, and we went and we downloaded probably like 1,200 documents, 700 of them, which were good documents, and then we uploaded them into our own offline large language model. We did something called a RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, and then we were able to like ask questions about this specific document set.
This would be the basis for your help desk bot.
Yeah, this would be like your help desk bot. But this was like a help desk bot about, hey, what happened in the Russian and Ukraine war with respect to this cyber attack. Yeah. But you can do stuff like that. And these are things that just weren't possible 3 years ago. Like you couldn't do stuff like this. This is a completely open source project that we open sourced. But that's what I got. I think I'll stop right there with everything.
This has been a great introduction to not only practically how to use these, but also where is this industry and where is it likely going?
Oh, goodness.
Thank
Yeah.
you for taking the time.
Oh, no problem.
It's fantastic.
No problem. Thank you for having me.